Thanks, Jane. Look, it's always challenging to come and talk to a group of aspiring leaders, and today's no exception to that. And what was really interesting is last night I was driving home from our governing council, about 9:30 or whatever it was, thinking about today, and changed my mind completely about what I was going to talk about. So bear with me on this one, and we'll see how we go. But I think, one of the privileges that you've got is a privilege that I think Peter and Jane and myself didn't have. And that's ability to hear from people and learn from people in a more structured format. So it's great to have you here. What I want to do though is I'm going to see if I can just flick a video on for about a minute, which gives you a little bit of a context of Adelaide Botanic High School. When I think about Adelaide Botanic High School, it means a real game changer in the education world for us.
We're yet to discover what its sort of full potential is, but done a great job in bringing everyone together.
The vibe of the place is more so like a university than a high school.
I'm so lucky to be here and have the opportunity to work here because this is such an incredible school.
When you actually come here and see the kids' faces and the joy of their learning and opportunity, it is just something to see.
Adelaide Botanic High School to me is the most amazing school. The connectivity between our location, our school and our spaces is just something that you just wouldn't get at any other school.
I like how it's quite open and from any floor you can see across the entire school.
Acoustic treatment throughout the building means that we're not interrupted by groups next door or down the hall.
It feels quite futuristic, almost like it shouldn't be here, like it's something that should not be like another 10, 20 years in the future, but at the same time it feels like it should be.
The zoos, the city, you can see the botanic gardens.
A lot of trees and green.
Lots of timber, I think, gives that a nice sort of calm atmosphere.
One of my favourite things about the school is the atrium space.
Whether we have guests, they sit and look up and it's just like, whoa.
We've not really understood how powerful a space is until we've moved into this building.
I think the attention to detail here is what makes Adelaide Botanic High School so special. Every finish is just amazing and certainly helps us to feel at home here at school.
All right, sorry the volume wasn't great on that, but I just wanted to show you that, so I gave you a little bit of context to the school because with COVID last year we weren't able to get a lot of people through the school to have a look. And you look at it and you kind of go, well, it's a great building, etc. But I want to sort of wind back to a particular point. As a person that's sort of been in this business for a long time, part of my thinking was always how great it would be to start a school from scratch and have the ability to do those things. And I want to really challenge you to have a little bit of a think about it. Imagine that you just won a position as the principal of a startup school. What would be the very first priorities or the very first things that you'd do? And it's not until you actually get put in that situation, you have to be really careful what you wish for, because you suddenly realise that you've been put in charge of something that's quite important and you've actually got to make some decisions. I want to share this one with you. And it was a moment in time when I'd found out I got the position, and I was told that the following day I'd be meeting on site, which was basically a bare bit of ground, with Susan Close. And the bit you can't see there is her lips moving. And the words came out, which was, Alistair, this is going to be a lighthouse school. It's going to be one of the most innovative schools. And this was my first meeting, just on site, ready to get this school started. And then the next sentence was, but it's going to have the absolute best NAPLAN and SASPA results. So there you go with a challenge. And when I think back to that very first period, I was on board, no team, and effectively I had a small office in Flinders Street where I'd close the door and just rock in the corner for as long as I could get away with it. But it really challenged you to think about, when you are going to start a school, what are going to be those priorities? What are going to be those key things that you're going to work on? And really that challenge of those requirements around, and I won't use the word compliancy, but expectation, and really that permission to really be innovative and do some things that are different. We did open, and on our very first day, 38 degrees, the bats next door in Botanic Gardens got disoriented, bumped into the glass windows, bled and died, and it looked like a scene out of a vampire movie. So that was the very first beginning part. Also, we only had years 8s and 9s, no older students, nothing that could guide them in terms of what do we do in this school. So we actually had, what do you meme as our behaviour code, and we created these memes that we worked through with kids in terms of, how do you actually do things in certain areas. In that first day, we also had ABC Radio with Ali Clark having a good go, and David Bevan having a good go at us in terms of all the things that happened, and expecting to talk to 2 kids about, the school on their very first day. We had a tiny little leadership team, all dressed in their colours, but we had a tiny little leadership team, and in our very first week, we also put on a swimming carnival. So, it was a pretty challenging week, and we finished the week on our balcony listening to Guns N' Roses in the Botanic Gardens and dancing to Living on a Prayer, which became our theme song for that very first part. So, there was a lot that happened between that very first appointment and that part. One of the things that we did prior to opening the school, though, was we visited a number of schools in Victoria, New South Wales, but we also visited a number of industries. And one of the ones we visited was IDEO in Sydney. It's a global design company that actually designs workplaces. And it's really designing some of the best co-worker spaces around the world. But their CEO had this amazing quote that he actually talked us through, and he said, if you're in a truly new space, you won't always know the answer, your team won't either, but you're going to venture into the unknown together, and curiosity is a great way to lead that charge. And in reality, what that did was it gave us some real freedom to actually be very innovative in what we did, because it wasn't about knowing all the answers, but it was about going in with a level of curiosity. And what's really interesting is that there's really 2 sayings for us that came out of that. And I haven't actually spoken, we've got some of our team here today, but I haven't actually spoken to them other than said don't heckle, all right? But one of the things is that as we work as a team, there's some sayings that we've actually taken out of that really drive what we do. And I could probably say the very first part of it, and they could probably finish it off. Alicia, don't hold. Don't hold your... Yeah. So, sorry, do hold. That's better. Thank you for correcting me. So one of the things we talk about is holding our ideas lightly. All right, and that really allows for innovation, because what it means is that you don't go too far down the track invested in an idea. It allows you that opportunity for innovation. It's also really important to look at some of the other things that we have as our sayings. So I'm going to try and get this one. I'll start it right this time. All right, but Britt, don't rush. Don't rush to. Yeah, so don't rush to solutions. Yeah, and one of the things that we've had to give people the time is to take the time to explore and not rush to solutions. So what I wanted to do this morning, and I'm going to sort of try and do it in some fairly quick bits, and you won't get detail, it'll be more like just a sort of a flash through. But our learning spaces, you look at them, you go, well, we can't do that because we don't have that stuff. You actually do. Our learning spaces are connected. And when I say that, it basically means that they have the ability to be opened up, closed up. They're very agile in the way that we use them. So when you look at some of our learning spaces, you'll also see there's very few bits of fixed furniture. We've only got 3 spaces that have screens on walls. Every other screen is mobile, so you can actually change the direction, the focus, etc. So what we've looked at is making sure that our learning spaces can adapt very, very quickly. And one of the things that means is they're sometimes very messy. But having the mobility means that you can very quickly change the context and structure of a classroom or a class space to achieve some things. The other part is that all of our spaces are connected in a way that every staff member works in a team and teaches in a team. And so that means that when we look at our class sizes, a number of our classes are 75 or 80 students. And within that class, they have 3 teachers attached to them. So it means that the spaces are able to actually allow that to happen. And just going through the spaces, you'll see that they're very see-through. And you start to learn to use the architectural terms of not sliding door, but operable wall. And so it effectively means that we can actually close spaces right down, but the level of visibility is very high. And what we find is the students have not been challenged by that at all. So one parent, when they came through originally, said, oh, but they're all going to sort of annoy each other through the glass. They don't even notice the other ones through it. So it's about that expectation of how it's used. The other part is that our staff don't have work areas that are separate from students. So they're completely embedded in the student spaces. So there is no staff room. We have a retreat where probably can get about 20 or 30 staff, but there is no staff room, and our staff are with students all the time. So, and again, there's a level of trust. Students know that where that little bit of carpet changes colour, that you vaporise as you step over it, but there is a level of trust in terms of being able to leave everything out and to have conversations within those spaces. And again, the furniture, although is relatively expensive, it's also furniture that we're seeing in most of our new builds and upgrades within schools. And it's just learning how to actually use that to adjust for pedagogy. If you leave it to the students to actually work out where it goes, what we've found is that it goes in all the places you don't want it. So we've started building pedagogy maps around the furniture. The other part is that we're a paper-light school, so we have no paper. All our work is done on our laptops, and it's a scribed laptop, which made remote learning very easy. But it also means that when we need resources, what we've done is we've got 25 resource trolleys around the school where kids can help themselves to post-it notes, paper, glue guns, all those particular things. And what it means is that those spaces then become quite creative spaces because those things are constantly available to them. Also wanted to talk just very briefly about the curriculum. Now, when you're starting a school, where do you start? You can either take one off the shelf, or you can actually start from the beginning. And I can assure you that for 24/7, my brain was full of this stuff. My dining room table, coffee cup going with it, and large sheets of paper was just scribbling, scribbling, and scribbling. But within that, we made contact with education people within the OECD, made contact with schools in China, of all places. There's a school called Whittle School and Studio. Amazing in terms of their thinking, not sure about their practice, but their thinking. And so really starting to dig deep worldwide, nationally, and within South Australia, and then trying to distill that into a curriculum that was going to meet the needs for our kids. So these scribblings did eventuate into a curriculum, but what was really interesting was the external pressures. And so there would be people that would say, well, I guess it's going to be like high-tech high, it's going to be project-based learning. And then you'd have others going, oh, it's got to be integrated learning. In effect, it's all those things, and we put it under a heading where we refer to our curriculum as a purposefully connected curriculum. And I'll try and show you how that's structured. We have our curriculum sitting within 4 learning areas. And so we have 4 learning area coordinators. In fact, we have 5 because we have 2 within STEM. But within those learning areas, our students go to STEM, or they go to global, or they go to the arts, or they go to lifestyle choices. And they don't go to PE, health, etc. So within each of those, it's about connecting the learning purposefully. And it's not about just integrating everything, it's not about project-based everything, but it's about making the connections where they're relevant. And that takes a lot of work. But as they work in teaching teams, our staff are doing an awesome job around that. And so what you'll see on a timetable for a student is the arts, or you will see global perspectives. And in with global perspectives, that's where they'll be doing their English, their HASS, their languages, etc. And then when you look at lifestyle choices, that's your health, PE, and food technology. The arts, obviously the various arts, and then STEM. So they are our 4 learning areas, and it is quite a different mentality, but it really enables the connections that can be made between them. But I want to take you through some of the thinking, and we went to a school in Sydney, I think it was, St Luke's. And the principal there made quite a brash comment, and he said, at this school, we only give the Australian curriculum what it deserves. I thought, that's a fairly brash comment. And then he went a step further and said, because it enables 20% of our time to really do some things that are different. And that got us thinking, and we looked at traditional timetables and we saw that there was a line for this, a line for that, and a line for this, and a line for that. And then when you looked at some of those lines, you went, well, hold on, where does that sit within the Australian curriculum? Why does it get equal time as something else? So we went back to the Australian curriculum and we actually used that as our focus. And we looked at the time allocations. And with a team that did hold their ideas lightly, because you'll see that when you look at that time, It's not what we see reflected on a traditional timetable. You know, you'll see a line of art, a line of PE, maybe a line of home ec. But if you actually wind it back to the Australian curriculum and look at the time allocations, you'll see that if you can hold to that, you end up with 20% of your time that you can actually do some amazing stuff with. So we worked on that. We have a timetable that's not line-based, it's block-based, and it's in 80-minute blocks. And what you'll see there will cause tears in some places, because as you work through it, you'll see that STEM gets 6 of those 80-minute blocks. You'll see that Global gets 6 of those 80-minute blocks, that PE, Health and Food Tech gets 2, and you'll see that the arts get 2. But as you get towards the bottom, you'll see that 20% of our curriculum sits in something called studios, and that is pretty exciting. So when you look at our curriculum, you'll see that in Year 8, our students have the 4 learning areas, but underneath that you'll see this thing called studios. As they move through the school, in Year 8 and 9 they have studios where every single term they make choices about what it is they want to do. And we have studios on a Wednesday. So Wednesday starts with a Studio 1, which is our kind of pastoral care wellbeing component, and then they have 3 80-minute blocks where they choose a variety of things that are not assessed against the Australian curriculum. They're actually assessed against the capabilities. So if you have a look at the sort of studios that our students are involved in, Globalise Yourself, Checkmate, which is chess, iRobot, Get That Glitter. There's a whole range of names, but what you'll also see is, you know, French Next Level. These are where our students can really stretch themselves out and do things beyond what they're doing within the Australian curriculum. And so some people go, well, it's just like electives. No, actually, if you go behind it with the thinking, it's a lot more powerful than that. So our students are actually selecting them based on their capabilities and the capabilities that they're wanting to develop and grow, as well as the pathways that they want to look at. So when it comes to actually the assessment component of that, we actually start assessing the sub-elements of the capabilities. And you might go, well, yeah, you're doing a lot of work around that. The power of that is that as our staff are working across the 80% of the Australian curriculum, the capabilities now are totally at the fore in terms of what they're doing, because they become really skilled at working within them. The other part is highly aspirational parents. You go, they're not going to let 20% of the curriculum go unassessed with an A to E. They love it. Our highest attendance in any given week is on a Wednesday when we have our studios. Our timetabler is dying because we make this an option that students choose term by term, so that way they can actually have choice and voice in their learning. A year's a long time for a Year 8 or a Year 9. Very quickly, I'm going to scan through a couple of these, but like any school, we have a precinct around us, but we're quite blessed by it. 20% is our target for our students learning within the precinct. And what we learnt from that was we had to actually challenge some rules. So within the guidelines, there is a thing called a local walk. Our local walk embraces the whole square mile of the city. However, every single walk is defined and signed off by parents, which means that during any lesson, a teacher can take 24 students with one teacher on that local walk. They can't go to the Botanic Gardens and then somewhere else, but they will send an EdSmart to the parents the night before saying we're going for a walk, not asking for permission, we're going for a walk, and it's to the Botanic Gardens. The parents then know the pathway, the safety zones and the procedures. And what it effectively means is that during a lesson we can step in and out. It is approved and it's a process, but it's another way that as we redesign a modern school, we need to challenge some of the myths that are there. Each of you has a community and a precinct around your school, and a local walk is a great way of actually accessing it. Lastly, I'm going to just quickly go through what the day structure looks like. Our kids start at 9:25 each day. Great way of them being able to get transport through the city, bike paths, those kind of things, and it works beautifully. They finish at 4. On a Wednesday, they actually start a little bit later. So they start at 10:15 and finish at 4, and the studios occur throughout the day. What you'll also see is the breaks are a little bit different. So our first break at 10:55 is our long break. That's when the kids actually get to eat not snacky foods and then have the sugary dip. It's when they get to eat the proteins, complex carbohydrates, those foods, and you get that extended concentration that comes out of it. They have the snacky one in the afternoon and then they go home for the dip. So effectively it works. Staff struggle with it for a starting point, but then their stomachs get used to it and it actually works very well. This is the most amazing thing that this is allowed to happen. Our staff all start at 8:25 or earlier. That's a compulsory start time. Every single morning of the week, we have a collab. We have 4 collabs that are shorter, around about an hour. We have a long collab on Wednesday. And that's where we have our planning time, our learning area time. It's not knit time, it's our professional learning. And if you look at that throughout a week, I think you can see the power of that time in terms of having an impact within your school. We also have no after-school meetings. We broke the rule this week and it won't happen again. All right? And that is that we finish at 4 and we finish at 4. So our collab time is where we can meet and do some of those things, but we never have an after-school meeting. And the productivity that comes out of that's quite unique. How do we actually hold all this together? We have a charter. Our charter really gives us our how and our why. And as we work our way through it, and this is just kind of a summary, I'm going to give you a link to it and you can just dig a little bit deeper into it. But it really gives us a really strong foundation upon which we work. And what it also means is a lot of our norms have come out of this. So when we meet, we talk about talking and we talk about being kind, specific and helpful. We also talk about being hard on content but soft on people. And that's, that sits fair and square in the way that we operate. We talk about the ting. The ting is a Chinese symbol which is listening to the king with 10 ears, 10 eyes and 1 heart. And it's something that we keep coming back to. And it's amazing, you actually hear kids when they're starting a meeting or starting to talk about something go, let's get our ting on first. And just really focusing at the start of a meeting. Also that notion of stepping up and stepping back. So those protocols come out of that component. So I wanted to sort of finish on when I thought about starting a school, the bit that was missing was culture. You have no culture, and until you don't have a culture, you actually don't know how important it is. And so this guy here was one of my ex-students from Heathfield. He went on to actually found Rising Sun Pictures. Obviously, he got bored with that because it was making too much money and it just became really famous. So he wanted to go out on his own and he started a company called Culture Amp. He now develops culture for the top 100 businesses around the world. So Airbnb, Nike, all of those, that's his business. If you look at his net worth, it's pretty good and he's got 3 million users. So I actually phoned him and thought, well, I might as well cash in on this. Had a good conversation. It was one of the biggest learning moments for me, just in terms of we think about our vision, we think about all the things we need to do, but sometimes we just don't attend to the culture component. So he gave me a lot of good advice, but we start to see it, and I'm sorry if the sound is not going to be loud enough, but I'll try and adjust it. I'll try and see.
Sure. I am the head of European Business, Industrial and Scientific Supplies at Amazon. Been doing that job.
Possible. We can't hear that yet.
Yeah, that's not going to be very useful.
My pleasure.
All right, I might leave it and I will lip sync it and just tell you. Molly Dobson actually heads up a part of Amazon. And one of the things Amazon has as its culture wherever you go around the world is every day is their first day. And that mentality comes through in everything that they do. And it's something that we try to generate within our school, so there's always that notion of every day is our first day. Every day we want to know what our client wants. Every day we want to make it the best that we can for them. And one of the things that we started to look at was that we really didn't understand the difference between culture and climate. And I think that's something that I wanted to just spend a few minutes on, because we talk about a school culture, and in fact, I think in most cases, we're actually talking about the climate. So if you have a look at this, we use an iceberg as our analogy for it, and you'll see it around our school quite a bit. But when you look at the climate component, the climate's what you see, you feel, you hear when you go into a school. And quite often we talk about that as being the culture. The culture is actually quite different. The culture sits below the line. And with the culture, It really is, it's all those solid things. It's our practices, our policies, our artefacts. But it's that aspect that actually impacts on the climate. And so in terms of actually trying to design a culture, you've actually got to be an architect of that culture, thinking about what you want for the climate. So if you have a look, and I can't read it off there, but I will here, we looked at our culture as being the way our staff work together, and we've often said that our culture is what people do when the boss isn't looking. It's those things that are heavily embedded in it. It's also really knowing our why, and why we do the things we do, what leads us to do what we do, and what we won't relent on. So that sits there as our absolute rocks, our firms. But what it also does is it shapes our climate. And that really is, the school's effect on people and the relationships. It's the behaviours that we feel and see. And what's happening when nobody's looking. And so you can sense that on any given day, and it can change throughout the day. So when you look at ours, we really had our charter as the bit that sat below the line. That's the bit that we wouldn't relent on. And it was our purpose. It was our DNA, our aspirations, our key attributes, and our coherence framework really sat around learning design, collaborative professionalism, well-being, and a fourth thing, which I can't for the life of me remember at the second, but I will come to it in a moment. All right? So that then became our charter. But what was also important was we didn't let the actual culture determine the climate without us being aspirational about what we wanted for our climate. So when you have a look at that, you'll see fun sat there. And that doesn't often come up, but for us, that came up as number one. And it was really interesting because it kept surfacing in our work, and we kept pushing it back down again, because it wasn't kind of educationally the thing, have fun up there, but it actually does sit there, because when you come into the school, you want it to be a place where there is some fun. And that's a challenge, because we're so focused sometimes on those NAPLAN results or that SEA. There needs to be some fun. Also, we wanted it to be welcoming, communicative, productive, collaborative, and supportive. And so they were the things that we aspired for in that climate. What's been really interesting is that as you go around the school, you'll see our charter everywhere. And our charter is powerful because it gives freedom to our leaders. They know that when they're leading, our teachers know when they're working, that they are working collectively and collaboratively, because the charter is really clear. And it really gives them a sense of, we know we're actually heading in the right direction. We're doing the things that are actually part of what we've been challenged to do, rather than everyone doing their own thing because they think that's the best way of doing it. It doesn't mean we don't have autonomy, but it means that we're working within a really clear understanding around that. And what was really interesting is, even thinking about today, we're adding more and more things to our culture. We're starting to look at our team teaching in that we have really good understandings around that. And we've got some great structures around it. That's become part of our culture. When we have a look at it, our community and our precinct has become part of our culture. So that grows over time. So I'm going to try and sort of finish off with this. One of the things that I'd really challenge you to do as you go back to your school is, as you go back into it, what's solid in your workplace underneath the water? And note that I use the term workplace. When we're talking about culture, you don't go to school just for the sheer love of working with kids. You go to school to get paid. It is a workplace. We happen to love working with kids as part of that. And so when we look at a workplace, it means that we look at industry and how industry actually manages culture in their workplaces. And we start to see some of the ways that that can occur. But that's a question I'd like you to look at. What's working well? What do people really value within that culture? And what can they rely on? Because it's actually really hard sometimes to step back and have a look at those things without some good questions to do it. The other part of it, and I'll just, it would be really good for you as a leader to go, so what is your ideal climate? Have you ever defined it? When you actually are leading within a school, what's your ideal climate? What would you want to see? And one of the ways that you can do it, and we've spent hours and hours and days exploring that in a whole range of ways, and you'll see fun did come up as part of that. But even just using a Y chart, what is your ideal climate? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What does it sound like? Because once you actually understand that, you can actually start building the culture underneath it to achieve that climate. So I'm going to leave you with our iceberg, a slightly bigger one, thinking about the culture being the bit below the line, thinking about the climate above it. When you look at the culture, does the culture meet the needs of your climate? So if you have what your desired climate is, does the culture that you currently have meet the needs of that climate? You know, what's solid? What's missing? So they're good questions to ask. What will you talk about and with who? So I want to leave you with that, but I will stick a QR code up because we're all very good at QR codes. But if you want to grab that, that links to all our stuff. What we do is we put our chart, we put a lot of our thinking and a lot of our resources up online so that people can access that. I hope there's some elements of what I've gone through that might challenge a little bit of your thinking, but if we're redesigning our schools, it really is redesigning. And in some cases, with Adelaide Botanic, you know, starting from scratch gave us the opportunity to do that. We could have easily just taken an off-the-shelf model. We haven't. We've taken a hard road, and I have to say it's been one of the most exciting trips ever. It's aged me heavily because you don't realise how hard it is to do some of those things. I want to finish just on one note. Over and over again, I have people go, "Oh, you're so fortunate. You can pick all your own teachers." Let me tell you, every single teacher comes to a school with a psychological contract about what school is about. And so it doesn't matter whether you're working with selecting your teachers or the teachers that you currently have, they each have the same. And so it really is working on that culture. And I would have loved to have shown you the Amazon one, but that notion of every day is the first day. You know, go back and look at the client. We work on a process where we constantly go back to look at the user, and the user is our student. And what is the user experience? And that was something that we learnt from industry. So in all that we do, we go back to that user experience as part of it. And you can then adjust that in terms of your staff user experience, your parent user experience. So I'll leave you with a few of those thoughts. I hope some of that was useful. Feel free to absolutely grill the people from our school today. So I'm just going to ask, those of you who are here from Adelaide Botanic, raise your hand. Now you know who to go and grill. All right, see whether or not that was accurate. But it's really interesting because when we look at culture, we started this year with 50% of our staff new. Next year, we're going to start with 40% of our staff new. So if you think about all those people, bring that into the school, you've got to build a really strong culture if you're going to move forwards as a single entity as a school.
Fantastic. Thank you. Can you join me in thanking...